Claudia Nemat, after Sheryl Sandberg. Well, you have heard the whole day that there are no women in tech. You have the contrary example. In just some minutes now, 3 women in tech and 3 women leaders. I think that all of us do not like the facts and figures which we got, that 93% of the European startups which ask for funding do not have a single woman in their managing team. But there are women in managing teams, and Claudia is one of those women. Now, the fact is, she has a predestination because her father was a specialist in nuclear physics. And Claudia studied normal physics, mathematics, and philosophy. And that is what makes her a strong leader. First as a university teacher, as a professor, then with McKinsey, and since 2011 in the Vorstand of Deutsche Telekom, which means the board of management, responsible not for philosophy, but for technology and innovation. Claudia, please. We have heard about women in technology. I imagine you must have felt quite alone when you started first to study technology and after that to be in McKinsey, responsible for technology, and now in Deutsche Telekom. How have you managed to control all these men around you?
Oh. What a question. I'm not sure if you control men as men believe they can't control women, and that's actually good. No, I have to say, I grew up like that, and in the meantime, Viviane, we have 2 women in our board, so I'm really happy to have some company on this one.
Well, for the audience, we must also say that we have been fighting the politicians and the female organizations and women in management in order to have more women at the top, because women need role models. But we are not here to speak about women, we are here to speak about technology. And I would like, nevertheless, because Sheryl has started with saying how her company is now completely shifting from not respecting data protection to a data protection and privacy protecting company. How have you received this information?
So I must say, I really like cross-European data protection for 2 reasons. Number 1, it strengthens the rights of the individuals according to our values. And number 2, it creates one market. Because for companies, it's very difficult if every country has their own regulation. So I think it creates a level playing field. Yes, of course, for the startups here, when it comes to implementation, I'm learning there are a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. And yes, there's now a tendency to do some sector-specific regulation on top, which doesn't make sense. But generally speaking, I think data protection, if not done in a wrong way, can be a huge competitive advantage.
First, this is the DNA of the Europeans.
Yeah.
It is explained by history. Second, you are absolutely right. During the whole day, I heard also complaints that Europe's market is not united enough. Now, with data protection, what we did, we united the whole thing. We eliminated 28 national legislations and replaced them with one regulation for all companies active on the soil of Europe, also for the American companies who take advantage of our infrastructure and of our capacity, economic capacity. Yes. That brings me then to the infrastructure, because you are a heavily regulated part of the economy. You must feel very upset if you see that other companies just don't cling to the law?
So maybe one point on, Viviane, on the data topic, because I just arrived over lunch, but I heard there was the message, Europe sucks, we are only capable of doing research, and other than that, we have dramatically fallen behind US and China. That was the message this morning. Now, Steffi, you said to me, say something positive. Yeah, say something, and this is actually what I will, guys. Do you believe we will unite the entrepreneurial spirit by compromising on our values? Or do you believe we take that as a strength and get our act together on technology leadership? And I have to say what I mean practically, because I want to use the opportunity as a plea for that. See, the current data capitalistic models are based, literally all, on the assumption that individual behavioral data on principle belong to the data platform in exchange for free services. And the social score model in China, by the way, which 80% of the Chinese people like, because they see an increase in their living condition, monitors individual behavior, and then, depending on whether you cross the street at a red traffic light, or you might say something bad about the Communist Party, if you behave well, you get tax relaxation. If you behave bad, you are not allowed to use public transportation. Now, there's one thing in common, which is the assumption that human individual data belong to a platform, a data capitalistic or state platform. Now I'm wondering, what's the chance? Guys, I would invest, and we are investing in startups, in literally any startup that leverages data, artificial intelligence, and connectivity to create a model which respects data sovereignty. And I believe one answer to that is blockchain. And guys, we need to get our act together. I would actually prefer having a 1% of all pension funds invested in that. Tax relaxation. BaFin needs to get more pragmatic in allowing startups to actually put part of the stock exchange on blockchain. Guys, we could become the mecca for blockchain if we just realize that we should stop being so complacent. Because the solution is not running after those systems which might not necessarily be compliant with our values. And this, therefore, I do not regret, to some extent, being regulated as long, Viviane, as it is fair and level playing field. But we should love our values and create something, and I think blockchain is part of the answer, which brings a model consistent with respect of individual data ownership as the successful of Europe. Chaka. And this is actually, guys, what I believe we want to do.
That's why we need women managers. You have understood why?
And then, Viviane, you can come to the connection holes of Deutsche Telekom. We can actually cover this as the next topic.
I have to come to those. Yes. Because tomorrow Peter Altmaier will speak here.
Yes.
And I have just read that Peter Altmaier is the German Minister of Economy. And I have just read a very complaining interview of Peter saying, Germany is lagging behind, and half of our communities risk to fall into the white spots. Now, this is an important element, because everything we have heard now about IoT, about e-health, about e-government, and so on and so forth, we need good infrastructure. And if we do not have the good infrastructure, we have a problem. So what would you say to Peter if Peter was here today?
Oh, so first of all, I completely agree that the best infrastructure is needed, and 99% of my job is dealing with that right now. Because I believe that any connectivity hole or connectivity disruption is unacceptable. And therefore, we have started the largest modernization of our mobile and fixed network since the existence of Deutsche Telekom. Just to give you a flavor, two things. We have right now 27,000 antennas. We want to add 10,000 antennas until 2021. And in case there are people of local political influence, may I kindly remind you that the permission procedures in Germany can take up to a year. So if we jointly want to accelerate that, we also here to get more practical, to get the antennas done. Another thing I would say right now, 75% of the under-earth cable construction capacity is only working for Deutsche Telekom. We run out of labor in the market. So my quick answer would be we work heavily on that. But we cannot do that alone. There are other operators. Our market share is 40%. And others who also need to invest. Not only Deutsche Telekom. It's a combined thing. And last but not least, I would say, looking at the upcoming auction, it would be super if the money would not used to fill. By the way, we don't have so many financial holds, but to pay the money for the auction, but rather spend the money to get the infrastructure built. So that would be a big plea I would have on this one, yeah?
You know what the problem is? When ministers of finance take decisions on technology, then you have always a mess. And here you gave the example. So I absolutely agree with you, this auction question, to get a maximum of money and not to invest this money in infrastructure or in technology afterwards, but in whatever that is simply a mistake of the construction of a government.
Yes, plus another advice I would have to every politician, please do understand that the laws of physics are also true for political leaders.
What do you mean by that?
What do I mean practically by that? In this auction, we auction high frequencies, 3.5 gigahertz. And for those who remember some physics, the logic is like this. The higher the frequency, the smaller the cell and the propagation rate, which means 5G on these frequencies is not suited to fixed aerial coverage. Why? Because that would mean that every 150 meters, you would have to put an antenna, which I think nobody really wants, right? So therefore, 5G high frequencies is not the solution for aerial coverage. This has to be done on 4G. So this is number one, I would say. And number two, there's a phenomenal myth in this country, which doesn't exist in any other country. And that myth says, you need 5G connectivity on every little Feldweg, on every little street for autonomous driving. Think about this. When you are in a car, you want the basic security functions of that car to function, regardless of having even the super low latency connectivity. Why? You want to stop the car in front of your kid no matter what, right? So, you need great connectivity on all streets and you need 5G later in order to do dynamic mapping, which means you want to have information about the environment, like traffic jams or maybe some things happening around the corner to be put into the car. And therefore, you need good connectivity on the cars. But some people in the meantime had the impression that this is the basis technology for autonomous driving, which is not true. So this is what I mean by respect physics. Yeah, so in this thing.
And respect also what is developed, because we know everything we have discussing here the last hours, IoT, driving, transport, e-health, and so on and so forth, the new industries, they all will benefit from 5G. So we need to have a good connectivity as a basis.
And that you need everywhere. You need actually connectivity everywhere. And there's another thing in 2020, 10 times as many things as human beings will be connected. Yeah, whatever you have, smart machines, smart robots, smart refrigerators, so these things. Now, to do that efficiently, 5G is the best technology, and you need that capability of 5G across the country. We call that the massive Internet of Things. You need it for automotive as much you need it for the agricultural industry.
Will there then be a conglomerate of German industries fighting with the government to get the authorizations and to build the infrastructure? Because if not, in this part of the world will not be a first mover, but a lagger behind. And that would be very bad, not only for Germany, but for the whole of Europe.
Yeah, this would be incredibly super. And believe me, we are really working hard together also with other telcos here in Germany and industrial partners to come to a conclusion what we can jointly do to get the best networks.
And we will help. Yeah. And then I asked...
by the way, as I'm positive, if I had the impression that in the end we will not succeed, I would have stayed in the United States and not come back to Europe, even in a role in such a sometimes interesting corporate environment like Deutsche Telekom.
Oh, speaking about the United States, it seems that there is not only a trade war going on, but also a 5G war going on who is allowed or not allowed to build the infrastructure in the United States. And other parts of the world are following the lead of the United States. How do you see that?
So, on principle, I see that everyone, every company in Europe, everyone here needs to make sure that technology which they use is secure. Of course, we all know there is not 100% security. So everyone has the obligation to test that and to make sure that there are no backdoors, that this is working well. Then also I see that every company that acts smart should never get dependent on just one or maybe two strategic partners. And let me formalize this in a more general way. I think being smart on innovation always means that you have to look in the entire world what you are using. And then, of course, you have to make sure that this is consistent with your values and your standards, and that you test this intensively well.
Well, Steffi has asked us to be positive. We started positive, and now we will finish positive, because what you just said now, consistent with our values, now that is a business model of Europe. The values which we have and which we should fight for. GDPR, for instance, is taken over now by more and more states and companies worldwide. So it's becoming a kind of a golden standard because it respects the human being.
Yes, and I think that's a fair point. Something which is consistent with our values, and for me there is no compromise on this whatsoever, but then not out of a situation of what I would call deficit. Now we invent regulation because we haven't succeeded otherwise. No. But because of the mentality I said at the beginning, because we believe that that is a competitive advantage if we just manage to overcome our complacency and get our act together to innovate, for instance, on these platforms and on blockchain according to our values. Yeah, out of the spirit of success, Viviane.
And we do have the talent pool in order to manage this.
I think
because if we look at facts and figures, 5 out of the 10 world top computer science universities are European. 31 out of the 100 world top engineering and technology universities are European. We have a world-class potential for talent at par with the United States and much better than China. What should our companies do in order to keep those we have educated here in Europe, and not to make them go to the United States?
By allow experimentation, what I said before, to actually, and to make sure that startups can grow better, by making sure that we embrace that we invest also in the growth phases, and that we do not apply too much of bureaucracy on the startups. This is actually because I don't want to have them only in research and on university and then going away or being bored, but also here. And in addition, Viviane, I would also start the global talent attack. And I would say, girls and boys in the world, whoever doesn't want to work in a social credit score system or in the existing data capitalistic model, come here and reinvent something which is based on values which had to prove themselves through hundreds of years of crisis in Europe, finally coming to peace. That would be my plea for attracting the talent in the world.
There is nothing to add, and we have been on the second on our 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.